My name is Joe Reichard. I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of the Sob Doctor. Today we're going to be working on what seems to be my subscribers' least favorite car in my fleet, which is my Mercedes ML55 AMG. I know, it's a bit contradictory. I have a Sob channel, I'm working on a Mercedes, but it is part of the fleet. I normally have like an off-brand car in the fleet, so there's probably always going to be one odd car being worked on in the shop. What we're doing today is, if you watched my last episode, I replaced the N19 module. I will put a card here, I think. I never get this right. It's either here or here. I'll just put two fingers up. It's here or here. So, replace the N19 module. I figured that would fix my heat. It actually partially fixed the heat because it went from blowing cold air to blowing lukewarm air. So then I was looking at the temp gauge was reading low, so I dug through the big pile of parts that came with the Mercedes, and it came with a thermostat. Which I'm guessing that meant one of the previous owners thought it needed a thermostat, so I'm replacing the thermostat today. Stay tuned. Okay, so the first thing we have to do to get to the thermostat is remove the plastic engine cover. Super easy. Just pull it off. The thermostat is right here at the end of the big hose. It's two external Torx. I'll figure out what sizes those are. And at first I didn't think, oh sorry, I pointed too high. This external Torx, down here, and that one right there. Now it looks like, it's going to be hard to see, it looks like this oil cooler hose, this bottom one that comes from this, may have to come off to clear this bottom bolt, so we're going to figure that out as we go. I am going to take the Serpentine belt off because I don't want to get coolant all over it, and that's really not that hard of a job. You just have to make sure you remember the routing. Okay, so to release the tensioner, 17 mil long belt tool, I guess you'd call it. Click it on, and then you release the tensioner. Now, I am not going to pull the belt completely off. I pulled the belt off of the tensioner. I'm going to let the tensioner go, alright. And then I'm actually just going to pull the belt down off the top portion. Leave it kind of like this, so you've still got most of the routing. I will put a routing diagram that I've stolen from somewhere on the internet in this area, just in case you get confused. So, now that the belt's off, got a little bit more space here. What I'm going to do, I was thinking about removing this lower oil cooler pipe, but this is not pliable at all. So I'm going to take the upper radiator hose off first, probably make a mess, and then I'm going to see what we can and can't get in there. And one of my tips for this, grab a milk jug, cut the top out, then you can actually stuff the radiator hose into it, catch any coolant or whatnot that's running out. So let's get this taken apart. I feel like the worm clamp on mine isn't factory. Mine's taking an 8 mil to take it off. You may have a different factory clamp on yours. Okay, so what I was doing there was I was just trying to actually mop up some of the coolant so that way I didn't have a giant mess. However, I'm going to anyways. So I'm going to grab some Torx and we're going to get this thermostat out. Okay, so two things are about to happen and I just noticed this. Number one, I've removed the belt completely because I don't want to get it contaminated with all kinds of coolant. Easy enough to put back in, not a big deal, and we'll just set that off camera somewhere. The other thing is, I was going to disconnect the lower oil cooler line. However, thought about that, and there's going to be coolant coming out of where the thermostat is. It's going to make a giant mess, and the last thing I want is that coolant to somehow end up in the engine oil. So what I'm going to do is, the cooler has 4 bolts on it. I'm going to remove those 4 bolts and just kind of like rotate the cooler slightly or move it slightly so I can access that bolt better. So the thermostat is a bunch of external Torx, or 2 external Torx, they're E10s. The oil cooler has 4 T30s. So you're going to need both external and regular Torx bits. So let's dive in. Okay, so that was a learning moment. I probably should have looked at how to do this in Mercedes workshop information system, but I decided not to. Something real good came of it though. So just so everyone knows, that's still leaking. This oil cooler, these go to the filter. I didn't know that. However, if you look on the bottom, this has been leaking for quite some time, and I was actually wondering where that oil was coming from, so me accidentally taking this off and oil spilling everywhere, and then pulling these lines, which I thought were oil lines that were actually cooler lines, coolant lines, because that makes sense. Oil, cooler. It makes a lot of sense. I found that these were actually leaking antifreeze as well. So I'm going to jump online, order up some hoses for here, and some, I'm going to guess there's gaskets. If there's not gaskets, it's probably just RTV. Clean this all up and then put this back together, probably not in this episode, probably in the next episode, because I'm just gonna get the new thermostat in at this point, and then I guess if I'm doing that, I may as well order the temp sensor that I didn't realize that I didn't have until now. So this project won't be completed in this episode, which kind of sucks, but I guess that means we're gonna have some W163 content for a couple episodes, so hopefully people watch it. It'll at least be humorous. So let's get the thermostat in. Okay, so E10, 2 bolts. All right, bolt number 1 is broken, so that's awesome. And so is bolt number 2. The best part is I had actually sprayed these down with Croil ahead of time to try and make sure that this didn't happen. So, well, let's get this thermostat out. Well, the thermostat's out. As I was afraid of, both of the bolts holding the thermostat in are still in because they broke. So this actually looks like an original thermostat. You look around the edge and it's just got a lot of corrosion around it. Here's the one thing. I thought it was stuck open, and it's clearly not. It's closed. I don't know that it's stuck or not. So, I may have just broke stuff and given myself more work for no reason. Let's just take a look at those two bolts. I'll show you what it all looks like. It needs to be cleaned up anyways, so we'll take a peek at that now. There it is, two broken off bolts. Fortunately, they're sticking out a bit, so I can probably either heat them up or croil them or something to get them out. Just a bunch of gasket material and stuff around the edge. This will all need to be cleaned up, cleaned out. Oh, that's easy enough. It's already done. Actually, I wonder if that was a replacement thermostat because... Hang on. Oh no, it didn't. I thought it had its gasket on it. So then we'll be able to clean this up, replace the two hoses to the oil cooler, put some new gaskets in, which, this has been removed and schmooed before. Come on. Why do I always find things like this? So, yeah, let's try and get those bolts out. Alright, so at this point, I'm going to let the croil settle in. I'm probably going to run up to the parts store, try and grab some of those extraction bits that grab on from the outside, and hope that does something. Okay, so what I did was, I ran up to the local, first the hardware store, and asked them for bolt extractors, and they said, yeah, we used to carry those, but they sucked, so we stopped carrying them. So, not liking that response, because I wanted to try these out, I went to the local parts store. The guy at the parts store said, I have a set, it's great, use some heat, and pull them out. I grabbed these, and this has one that should be small enough in it. So we're gonna hit this with a little bit of heat, give this a shot. If this don't work, I guess I'm gonna have to pull the welder out. So let's see what happens. Well, I guess I should have test fit one of these on first. I pulled the smallest one out, and it's way too big for that bolt. So, welder it's gonna be. Alright, let's see if this amateur welder can weld a nut on there and get that loose. Alright, so I'm actually going to let that cool for a bit. I think the last time I tried cracking it too quick right after I welded it. So I'm going to let that cool, let it all set up and whatnot. I'm not the best welder on earth, but I figure I can at least do this. So let that cool for a bit, and then I'll try cracking it in a little while. And all that came off that time again was the nut that I welded on. You can actually see where it had welded to it, and then the welds broke. So I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on extraction for that. Alright, well, this is the point where I'm giving up on the ML for today, so let's just do a quick recap. I removed the oil cooler, which had to come out anyways to do this. Found out that the seals are not only dried out extremely hard. Here, let me just grab them quick. Found out that the oil cooler seals are not just dried out and extremely hard and probably not sealing, but, hard to tell, but there's RTV on both of them. So those need to be replaced anyways. The oil cooler hoses were leaking, and those actually hold coolant, which for some reason I said oil to begin with, and I wasn't really thinking that one through too much, because that goes directly into the thermostat housing almost, so that was kind of a dumb statement. Then I broke both bolts that hold the thermostat in. I've tried grabbing them with a vice grip, welding a nut on, heating them up after welding a nut on, heating them up and grabbing them with the vice grips, Croyle, and a bunch of other things. None of that's worked, so I'm probably going to end up drilling them out. Funny enough, I asked for the bolt pitch and size and length on the Mercedes forums, and someone said, I'll put it up, hold on, let me step to the side, I'll put it up here. Somebody said, good luck drilling the bolts out. So that's what's definitely going to end up happening, unfortunately. I didn't want to turn my winter daily driver into a project in the middle of winter, but that's what happens when you have no heat. I wanted to get the heat fixed. I wanted to fix that, and it's just what happens when you have 20-year-old cars. Things break. So I'm going to have to get an angle, one of those angle adapters for my drill, or an angle drill. I don't know. I'll figure that out. Going to have to get the right tap, the right drill bits, the whole thing, like, that whole deal. I actually may have the right tap. I need to check and see what size it is again. I don't remember off the top of my head. And in the next episode, or one of the next episodes, I should say, I'll be drilling those bolts out. So I'm not excited. And if you're wondering why I keep looking over, I keep looking over at the Mercedes, kind of as to, like, scold it or something. I don't know. But here's the good thing that'll come of it. I'm going to do those oil cooler hoses and the oil cooler hoses and O-rings. I'm going to do the thermostat, the temp sensor. It's funny, I started throwing this stuff in my cart in FCP Euro, and I'm under 20 bucks still, which is really cool. So I'm going to do all of that stuff. I'm also going to do the power steering pump reservoir has been leaking. I actually got one with it when I bought it. I never installed it, which I probably should have. So I'm going to do that as well while I have it all apart. I guess I'm fixing the Mercedes up this week. Unfortunately, the 9000 might have to wait a little bit, which really sucks. So unless I can maybe get a little extra shop time, I'm not sure if that'll happen, though. Anyways, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And sob on, folks.